Episode 56 CF. New York. ROSEP View, a New York State bill sponsored by Democratic State Senator Kevin Parker, sneaks in a clause that many overlooked. It suggests changing the definition of what is considered renewable energy under the state law to include electricity produced from burning wood, a process known as forest biopower or forest biomass. It is disheartening that Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is one of those involved in trying to keep the Black River biomass plant open. Bill to alter NY's climate law includes 11th hour bid to keep state's last biomass power plant open. City limits. Energy to include the burning of wood, known as forest biomass. The state law to include electricity produced from burning wastes, like cow. Bill to alter NY's climate law includes 11th hour bid to keep state's last biomass power plant open. April 10, 2023. Lawmakers are trying to keep the Black River power plant at Fort Drum from closing by changing the state's definition of renewable energy to include the burning of wood, known as forest biomass. This process has been scientifically proven to pollute more than coal. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity. Office of the New York Governor. Environmental groups were rattled last month by the introduction of legislation that seeks to change how the state's 2019 Climate Act accounts for greenhouse gas emissions. But the new bill, sponsored by Democratic State Senator Kevin Parker, also sneaks in another clause that many overlooked. It suggests changing the definition of what is considered renewable energy under the state law to include electricity produced from burning wood, a process known as forest biopower or forest biomass. The inclusion of forest biomass in particular concerns the environmental community because it's been scientifically proven to produce elevated quantities of carbon emissions. Adding it to the state's definition of renewable energy, environmentalists say, would be a significant step back in phasing out its use in New York, and would set a bad example for the rest of the country. And the language in the present New York State bill includes a curious caveat. The new definition would apply only to power plants producing forest biomass as of December 31, 2022. Environmentalists who spoke to City Limits said the time frame signals a move from lawmakers to stop the shutdown of Reenergy Black River, the last biomass power plant with a government contract left standing in New York. Located near the northern border upstate inside a U.S. Army base known as Fort Drum, the plant supplies electricity to the base and is marketed as the largest renewable energy project in the history of the U.S. Army. Black River relies on a contract with the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, to function, but the 20-year agreement expires in May and the state has shown no intent in renewing it. The Black River wood burning plant stopped running on March 31, 2023 and is now laying off employees, according to Reenergy Holdings, the company that owns the facility. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a senior member of the Armed Services Committee and an avid supporter of the plant since its opening in 2014, reportedly spoke to leaders in the state assembly and Senate to keep Fort Drum's plant from closing earlier this year. Elected officials have been lobbying the state to provide funding for this facility and keep it operating using very disturbing language that claims forest biomass is clean energy, said the U.S. Policy Director at Partnership for Policy Integrity, PFPI, an environmental organization that opposes efforts to keep the Black River plant alive. Burning forest biomass is not carbon neutral. That's been completely debunked by science for over a decade. The green label that yields profits. Forest biomass production is being phased out in New York because it has been scientifically proven to pollute more than coal. Black River's biomass power plant is permitted to emit more than 2,500 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt an hour. Meanwhile, coal plants, which New York has phased out due to their climate impacts, emit 2,180 pounds of carbon per megawatt an hour. Both of the bills that Senator Parker sponsored would allow the Black River, a wood-burning company, to continue selling renewable energy credits, RECs, by changing the definition of renewable energy to include biomass production. but only one included language to extend the contract with NYSERDA until November 30, 2034. This bill was introduced in last year and was put back on the table in February 2023. Black River hopes the legislation can still turn things around. 21 environmental groups signed a letter opposing the allocation of state funds to keep the Black River plant from closing, claiming it will cost taxpayers money without advancing compliance with New York's renewable energy or climate mandates. PFPI is denouncing Black River's attempt to change the definition of renewable energy in the climate law. A bailout would change an entire climate law and produce a step backward in a nation-leading definition of renewable energy. Debunking the carbon-neutral myth. Back in 2016, the United Nations cited biomass in its definition of renewable energy, but over the past decade, scientists debunked the myth that burning forest residue can be sustainable. A biochemist who put together New York's Climate Act says it may take 100 years for the forest to regrow and offset wood burning emissions. Under the New York State Climate Act's definition of renewable, forest biomass didn't make the cut. What we really need to focus on is using energy produced from wind, solar, hydropower to produce electricity that runs heat pumps and homes and electric vehicles on our roads. A study produced by the environmental advocacy group Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, examined each step in the forest biomass supply chain. It looked at a specific scenario in which forest residue collected in the U.S. is converted into wood chips and shipped to the U.K. to be burned for energy. No matter where you're burning the wood, there will be emissions in addition to the emissions released by the smoke stack. So when you don't account for those emissions, you are missing a major part of the climate impact, said Sami Yassa, a senior scientist at NRDC who worked on the study. Just like burning fossil fuels, burning wood produces a series of air pollutants that cause health harms, from asthma attacks to cancer to heart attacks, resulting in hospital visits and premature deaths. Adding forest biomass back into the definition of renewable energy in New York State will be a step backwards in phasing out the practice of burning wood for energy nationwide. There are 135 biomass power plants operating across the country that reported burning solid wood in 2022. If the U.S. Congress or individual states attempt to erroneously claim that forest biomass is carbon neutral, it will set back our efforts to reduce emissions and address climate change. Parker's bill seeks to change how the Climate Act accounts for greenhouse gas emissions and tweaks the definition of renewable energy to include biomass. Woodland fire warning issued in Westchester County, officials say ABC 7 New York. ABC 7 New York. The burning of tree limbs or other organic debris is not permitted, of any charcoal used in a grill or ashes from wood burned in a fireplace. With increased fire danger, DEC reminds New Yorkers, annual residential brush burning. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. DEC enforces the annual brush burning ban to prevent wildfires and only charcoal or dry, clean, untreated, or unpainted wood can be burned.